All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going on a bit of a treasure hunt, you could say. We're digging into gold investment, but not just anywhere. This is gold in Iran, specifically the Kian Gold Fund. We've got this Kian Group fact sheet. It's from March 16th, 2025. It's our guide for this journey. Now, I know what you're thinking. Gold in Iran. Yeah, I thought the same thing, but trust me, this fact sheet is really interesting. Over 33,000 individual investors all putting their money into this, gold, and get this, their benchmark. It isn't just a price of gold. They're also looking at, well, you might not expect this, apartment prices in Tehran. Yeah, I know, right? So get ready, because this is going to be a fascinating deep dive. Okay, first thing that jumped out at me, 727% cumulative return since it started back in 2017. Whoa. But before we get too excited about those numbers, can you help us understand what's driving that kind of performance?
That's a great question to start with. It's really important to, look past those big numbers and understand the strategy behind them. See, the Kian Gold Fund, they're not just trying to mirror the price of gold. Their benchmark is a mix, 50% gold bullion, 50% Rifa Gohars. Those are a specific type of gold coin.
So they're diversifying,
Yeah.
even within gold itself.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the fact sheet also shows most of their assets are in gold bullion certificates, like 75% to be exact. Can you explain those a little? What are they and how are they different from just owning physical gold bars?
Sure. So gold bullion certificates, they basically represent ownership of gold. But the gold's held in a vault somewhere secure. The investor doesn't have to, actually have the gold themselves. It's kind of like having the benefits of owning gold, but with more convenience, and it's safer too.
Got it. And the rest of their assets? Those are mostly those physical Rifa Gohars coins.
You got it. Certificates are more practical for holding gold, but those physical coins, they appeal to investors who want something tangible, something they can actually hold.
Makes sense. A mix of both. But let's go back to that benchmark for a second, that Tehran apartment prices thing. Why are they tying their performance to that? It's not, it's not a typical investment strategy, is it?
Yeah, that's what makes this fund so unique. See, in a lot of Western markets, gold is seen as like a store of value or a hedge against the global economy, when things are uncertain.
So it's not just about what's happening with the international
Yeah,
price of gold.
exactly. By tying their performance to Tehran real estate, they're basically saying, look, lots of Iranian investors use gold differently. They use it as a hedge against inflation in Iran and against, the local market going up and down. It's about protecting their buying power, but within the Iranian economy.
I see. So it's capturing both the global gold trends and what's happening locally in Iran. That's really interesting. Now, this fact sheet, it has this section called Bubble. It shows the difference between the market price of gold and the fund's NAV, the net asset value. Can you explain what this bubble actually is?
Okay, so this bubble, it's basically market sentiment, but in Iran specifically. It's how much gold is perceived to be worth in Iran compared to its price internationally. Basically, how much extra are Iranian investors willing to pay for gold compared to the global price?
So a bigger bubble means there's a high demand for gold in Iran, maybe because of worries about the local economy or because people aren't confident about other investment options.
Exactly. It's a measure of how much they believe in gold as like a safe haven. And don't forget, the fund can invest up to 20% in derivatives. That can make this effect even stronger.
Derivatives. That sounds well complicated. Can you break that down a bit? What does that mean for someone who invests in this fund?
Okay, derivatives can be tricky. Basically, they're financial instruments that get their value from something else. That something else in this case is gold. So instead of buying or selling actual gold, the fund uses derivatives to make kind of like bets on which way the gold price is going to go.
So like it's a side bet on the price of gold without actually owning the metal?
You got it. It lets them potentially profit from press movements, whether gold goes up or down. But it also adds a different kind of risk. The value of those derivatives, it can change a lot, and you could actually lose more than you initially invested.
So it's a tool that can make your gains bigger, but it's not simple, and there are definitely downsides. Seems like you really need to understand how those work before investing.
Absolutely. Investing in a gold fund, especially one that uses derivatives, well, you need to know what's going on under the hood. It's not just about hoping the price of gold goes up.
Okay, so it's not just about the price of gold itself. There's a lot more to it. Investing in a gold fund in Iran seems a lot more nuanced than you might think, even for one that seems successful, like Kian's.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as it looks at first glance. We've talked about like their strategy and that whole bubble thing. But I'm curious about the people behind this. The fact sheet mentions Kian Group. Who are they exactly, and what's their role in all of this? Well, Kian Group, they're a big deal in Iran, financially speaking. They offer a whole bunch of different investment stuff, products, services. This gold fund, it's just one part of what they do.
Okay, so they're not just some small operation. They're a serious player in Iran's financial world then.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact sheet, it actually gives some details about the team managing this specific fund. They've got Anpardo Afteb Kian listed as the fund manager, and Kian Capital Development Financial Group, they're the market maker.
So it sounds like they've got professionals handling the day-to-day operations. But what about oversight? Accountability. Are there things in place to make sure everything is transparent and to protect the investors?
Definitely. The fact sheet mentions a custodian, an auditor, and a trustee. All of those play a really important role in keeping things, balanced and checked.
That's good to hear. Makes it seem like they're taking a serious approach to managing the fund and keeping those investors' assets safe.
Yeah. And another thing worth noting, they have to keep at least 70% of the fund's assets in gold, whether that's bullion, coins, or the certificates. The other 30%, that gives them some flexibility to manage risk and maybe get some extra returns through like strategic investments.
So they're sticking to their focus on gold, but they've got a little room to play around within those boundaries. You mentioned earlier that the fund can invest up to 20% in derivatives. I'm still a little fuzzy on that. Could you maybe go into a little more detail? I know they can increase gains and losses, but how do they actually work, and what are the specific risks?
Okay, so derivatives, they can be a bit complex. Think of them as contracts. Their value is tied to how another asset performs, in this case, gold. So instead of directly buying or selling gold, the fund uses these contracts to kind of place bets on whether the price of gold will go up or down.
Oh, okay. So it's like they're betting on the price of gold without actually needing to own the physical gold?
Yeah. Exactly. They could potentially make money if the price moves in the right direction, up or down. But like I said before, there's a different kind of risk with derivatives. The value of these contracts, it can swing wildly, and sometimes the losses can actually be bigger than the initial investment.
Right. So it's a tool that can amplify gains, but it's not a simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely seems like an investor would need to really understand those details before jumping in.
Absolutely. With a gold fund that uses derivatives, you really need to know how they work and what the risks are. It's more than just hoping the price of gold goes up.
Right. Okay. So we've got the players, the strategy, and a better idea of how derivatives work in this context. But what about the actual performance of the fund? I mean, that 727% return since it started is impressive. But the fact sheet also mentions annualized returns. Can you shed some light on those? What do they tell us?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The total return over time, yeah, it's impressive. But when you look at it year by year, there's some big variations. For instance, in 1399, that's 2020 for us, the fund had a huge return, like 94%. But then in 1403, that's 2024, there was a quarter where they actually lost like 30%.
Whoa, that's a big swing. So even with that great long-term return, there were some pretty bumpy periods along the way.
Exactly. It really shows you why you can't just focus on the overall numbers. Those ups and downs, they remind us that past performance, no matter how good it looks, it doesn't guarantee anything for the future. And it shows just how volatile the gold market can be, especially in a place like Iran.
Yeah, and don't forget about those derivatives. They could definitely be a part of those big swings in performance, both the good and the bad. It's definitely not a fund for someone who's risk averse. Speaking of the fund's performance, I'm curious about that benchmark they use, that 50-50 mix of gold bullion and Rifa Gohars. How did that benchmark actually perform compared to the fund itself?
Honestly, the fact sheet doesn't give us specific numbers for the benchmark's performance, so we can't really compare them directly. All we see is the fund's returns.
Huh. So that's a missing piece of the puzzle then. But the fact that they even have a benchmark, it tells us they're trying to do better than it, right? They're not just passively following the price of gold. They're making decisions trying to generate bigger returns, right?
It's a safe bet to say that, yeah. Having a benchmark usually means they're actively managing the fund. The managers are using their expertise, trying to beat the market, hopefully.
Which makes sense, right? They can invest in derivatives. They can shift their gold holdings around strategically.
Right.
They're not just sitting there on a pile of gold bars. They're actually working to try and get those returns up.
Yeah. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. The fund strategy, the people involved, those derivatives, and even their performance history. But let's shift gears a bit. I want to talk directly to you, the listener. As we've been talking about all this, it really struck me gold isn't just like one thing everyone understands the same way. It seems like it means different things to different people, plays different roles depending on where you are in the world?
Yeah, I think that's a really sharp observation. Gold, it's not just some commodity. It's like it's got cultural meaning, it's an economic tool, it's even a psychological symbol. All those things wrapped up into one. And how it's seen, how people use it, that could be totally different in different cultures, different economies.
Mm,
Right. Here in the West, we tend to think of gold as that safe haven, a hedge against inflation, something to hold on to when things get shaky. But this Kian Gold Fund, with them tying it to Tehran apartment prices, like gold's got this deeper connection to their local economy. It's almost, I don't know, like gold speaking a different language in Iran.
haha. I love that analogy. Like, there are these different dialects of gold, right? Each one shaped by local customs, their economic situation, even their history. And getting those nuances, that can be so valuable for investors, even if they're not putting money into those specific markets.
Because it makes us step outside our own way of thinking about these assets. We can't just assume everyone sees it the same way.
Exactly. It forces us to consider how other cultures, other economic systems, they might look at the same thing in totally different ways.
So what are some other, I don't know, dialects of gold you've come across? What are some other ways people use gold around the world that might surprise our listeners?
Well, take India, for example. Gold is huge in their weddings and other traditions. It's seen as like a symbol of prosperity, family legacy, something you pass down through generations. And that cultural importance, it creates this massive demand for gold jewelry, gold coins. That, of course, impacts their local gold market in a big way.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about investment for them, it's woven right into their culture.
Exactly. And then you've got China. They're increasingly seeing gold as a strategic asset. The Chinese government, they've been buying up gold reserves, probably to diversify what they hold, and maybe to rely less on the US dollar. And that kind of strategic buying, it can have a big impact on the global gold market, create ripples.
So each region, each culture, they have their own special relationship with gold. It's shaped by their history, their economy, even their psychology, all mixed together.
You got it. And when we recognize those different dialects of gold, it gives us this deeper understanding of global markets and investment possibilities. It reminds us that even something as seemingly basic as gold can be a lot more complex than we think at first glance.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. This deep dive into the Kian Gold Fund, it's been really eye-opening. We've seen not just how this particular investment works, but also those bigger cultural and economic forces that shape how we view and use something like gold. It's a good reminder that the investment world is full of surprises. And if you're curious, if you're willing to see things from different angles, well, you can discover some pretty valuable stuff.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about broadening our understanding and challenging those assumptions we all have.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of gold in Iran. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even gained a whole new appreciation for just how complex and diverse the global markets really are. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.